Hi, everybody. This is Dan Cerrucci. Once again, I'm here with Andy Pollack and Jack Branyan, and we are going to be talking about the problems that are being faced by our kids and our school system, and more particularly, restorative justice, something that's catching fire all over the country in school districts and is causing a lot of controversy. I want to begin by just double checking and make sure that we're live on Facebook and Twitter and that we're coming through to all of you. And yes, there we are on Facebook. I'm going to edit the audience and open it to the public so that everyone can see it. And there we are. And this means, fellas, that you can also go to your Facebook page and share this. It's at my Facebook page, Dan Cerrucci on Facebook. And I also want to make sure that we are on X, formerly known as Twitter. And let's see. Here we are. And there we are. So we are live on Facebook and Twitter. And Jack Branyan, you are running for school board here in Cherry Hill Township,
right?
South Jersey, Camden County, just outside of Philadelphia. And Andy, of course, you are nationally known and you have a dramatic and tragic story. Why don't you tell us as briefly as you can, Andy, how you got involved in all this? I'm letting Panina Mintz in as well. Dr. Panina Mintz, who's been very involved here in Cherry Hill with the schools and with education. Welcome, Panina.
Okay. Great to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you.
I'm asking Andy briefly tell us, and Andy, by the way, I just once again viewed your speech from the last Republican National Convention. It was absolutely heart-wrenching. But Andy, for the purpose of those watching, tell us how you got involved.
Well, I didn't have a choice, really. It was February 14th in 2018, Valentine's Day, and it was a day that I'll never forget. There was a shooting at my daughter's school, and 17 people were killed, and there was close to 3,000 students there, and out of that, one of them was my daughter. She got shot 9 times on the 3rd floor. So I got, a big education of what happened and what went on in that school district. Like when a parent has a child that's murdered, they're never the same. It's something that time doesn't heal a parent when their child is murdered. It feels like it was last week and it's been over 5 years. But let me jump into it because you guys are in Jersey and you're surrounded by a cesspool of Democrats there that are going to push these policies that led up to what happened in Parkland. And I could tell you that because I wrote a book. If any of the parents in that school district want to read it, I consider it a handbook for parents. It's called Why Meadow Died, the people and policies that were in place. I put all in that book. And I urge parents, educators, people running for school board members, superintendents, they all should read it. So if you guys remember, after the Parkland incident, there was a lot of kids that got vocal with that March for Our Lives and everything. They wanted to push the focus onto the rifle.
Right.
And if it was the rifle, I'd be here talking to you about the rifle. But I did my own investigation because after the shooting, kids started reaching out to me and saying, this kid was in trouble for years. This kid threatened to rape kids. This kid threatened to shoot the school up. This kid was expelled from school numerous times or suspended. So I started following up on everything. And what I found out, what was going on in that school, would shock any parent. Like I found out the shooter was actually frisked every morning before he went to school.
It's unbelievable.
And I didn't know that. Being a parent, you think Parkland, Florida, they consider one of the safest towns in the state, if you look it up. So what I found out was there was a superintendent. And if you guys want to ask me questions, because I got a lot to tell you guys to educate you on what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like this Cherry Hill School District's running down the same path as Broward County School District.
Yeah.
So Broward County got a gentleman named Robert Runcie. He came from Chicago with ties to Arnie Duncan, who was the Secretary of Education at the time under President Obama. So they hired Superintendent Runcie, and he came to Broward County. And the biggest thing was that African-American children were getting suspended and arrested more than Caucasian children at the school. And what could he do to change it? What's going on? So he brought in a program, and what he thought would be great was, let's stop suspending, let's stop arresting, let's stop, expulsions, and we're going to put them into a program. All the students, we'll put them into this program where they could go, if they commit a crime, they'll go into this program called the Promise Program that he brought to Broward County. In that program, children were allowed 4 misdemeanors per school year without ever getting introduced to law enforcement. Okay? And they were allowed to sell drugs, they could assault a teacher, they could rob an iPhone, whatever it may be. They were allowed. When my daughter was murdered, up until that year, 4 misdemeanors per school year without ever getting arrested, introduced to law enforcement, suspended, expelled. So what happened is now this Rob and the sheriff joined on to the program. He signed it, and the superintendent signed it, and all the school board members. So what happens real fast is within a year, suspensions were down 75%. Okay, arrests were down 60%. And he was gloating, the superintendent, that he's the miracle man, that he made Broward schools incredibly safe because there's no more suspensions or people getting arrested in the schools. So what happened was they just stopped reporting, and they called this their restorative justice program. Okay, and so the murderer that shot my daughter was put into the program in middle school, okay, where he never even showed up to the program for carving some swastikas on a table and using the N-word at kids. So what happens is, because I wrote this book and I interviewed way over close to 50 teachers that worked in the schools, the kids have no accountability, okay? And it starts hurting, everyone. There could be 5, 6 kids causing so many problems, but they affect the lives of every student in that school. So the teachers are getting beat up, kids are getting beat up, crimes are getting committed, drugs are getting sold in the schools, and these kids are just getting put into what's called the Promise Program. So this is what happened leading up to my daughter's murder. Especially so many teachers were getting physically harmed within the school district. And in my opinion, and with law enforcement, because I consulted with many chiefs and sheriffs throughout the country, when you don't give kids accountability, regardless of their color, I don't care what color a kid is. If you don't show accountability to a child, it just leads them up for failure. That's what it does. Kids need accountability at an early age to set them up for success when they graduate high school. So in these years that the Promise Program was implemented in Broward County, felonies skyrocketed from children from 18 to 25
Right.
because never held accountable, never introduced to law enforcement. You know, law enforcement at that age, they want to help children. They want to mentor children. They don't want them being constantly arrested or going down the wrong path in life. They're there to mentor them. So felonies skyrocketed in Broward from kids aged from 18 to 25. This is what happened with this program, with this restorative justice program. Like the one that killed my daughter, he trespassed at the school a year before he killed my daughter and wasn't arrested. He wasn't they nicknamed him Crazy Boy in the school. He trespassed at the school, not ever arrested. If they maybe arrested him that time when he trespassed into the school, maybe he doesn't come back in a year and kill 17 people.
Well,
guys got any questions or anything so far?
Yeah,
What's
Andy, let me very first say, you know, your story, as I said, is heart-wrenching. Your battle from that point on has been absolutely valiant. That's the only word I can think of to describe it. We're so incredibly, incredibly sorry for your loss, not only your loss, but the loss of so many others in violent incidents in way, way too many schools. Now, I'm speaking, and by the way, this is live on Facebook and Twitter. It's live on my YouTube channel, and then I will put this recorded program on dancerucci.com so that more people can see it, and it'll be there permanently. I speak as a former fifth grade teacher and educator and a former university lecturer. So I know a little bit about education. My wife was an elementary school teacher for more than 30 years. She saw the steady decline and erosion of discipline in the schools, and she worked in what was considered a relatively safe, sort of rural school district. What I have seen is that education latches on to fads, fad movements and pedagogies that spread very quickly in the education community. It's every few years, it's the latest solution, and these fads come and go. What has happened is that the fads, I call them fads, they're really much more serious and dangerous than that, have become increasingly radical. I looked up and make no mistake about how the proponents of these doctrines, because they are doctrines and dogmas now, how relentless they are. I looked up restorative justice, and I was able, 90% of the stuff that I found on Google, the internet, whatever you want to call it, was propaganda, basically, pushing restorative justice, which, as I understand it, in the simplest terms, is putting the accused and the accusers, or the accused and the aggrieved, together in a circle and having them talk through the situation like some kind of group therapy, and thus absolving the administrators and the people who run the schools and everybody else of any apparent responsibility. Now, I've kernelized it. I've put it in the simplest terms I know. Penina, I'm going to ask you your reaction.
Well, I would say restorative justice is basically code word to the evisceration of basically Western civilization justice system. So they can't say to you or to the teachers or to the parents, we want to dismantle law and order in the schools, because that's not going to go very well. So they're going to put a pretty name to it. We'll call it restorative justice. And basically, it's a new religion, basically, that basically discards everything that we know about Western civilization justice system, where justice is blind. What they're saying is we're going to take the perspective of the abuser or the criminal, and we're going to treat them differently because they're oppressed. Therefore, their justice is different than the victim's justice. So we're now creating a two-tier system of justice where we're going to treat the victimizer more leniently, and we are not pursuing justice for the victim. And you euphemize that under the guise of restorative justice, where it's really a wonderful name, right? Who wouldn't want to see justice restored? But that's the complete opposite of restoring justice. It's actually eliminating justice for the victim. It's victimizing the victim twice. The first by the criminal, and secondarily by the school system or by the authorities at hand that are implementing this cultish religious policies.
And this is being done in many, many cases without the knowledge of the parent or parents of the victim. I read an account where a woman's son was relentlessly bullied and harassed in school. He tried and tried and tried again to get some justice. They pushed him into a restorative justice situation all along, unbeknownst to his parents, where he had to sit and be confronted by the young people who harassed and bullied him, and was further humiliated and was afraid to tell his parents. And when his mother, through relentless investigation, finally found out and confronted him with it, he completely broke down. And she eventually had to take him out of that school district. Now, Jack Brannion,
Yeah.
there's a restorative justice program is underway in the Cherry Hill schools, is it not?
It is.
Tell us
That's my
what
understanding.
you know about it.
Not just Cherry Hill, it's throughout the whole country.
Well, yes.
Every major city, you know.
We're here in Cherry Hill right now, but it's not only throughout the whole country, Andy. It's really international now. I've seen it in Australia, New Zealand, other countries. But Jack, tell us what you know about it.
Well, let me just say, just following up with what Panina said, I think there is a something bigger going on here that with restorative justice, I call it word contamination. There are just so many phrases, the equity and equality, anti-racism. You might think that means being against racism. When you get close enough, it's really just the opposite. Words like the sex ed and the gender journey, these are all very soft words, but down the road, they have very hard meanings. And what's happening along the way here is that academics is being de-emphasized. And frankly, the academics in the school systems are declining in their math and their education performance. And there is a parallel between the restorative justice, the sex ed programs, all of these things I call distractions, with the anti-racism, climate justice, all types social justice. It keeps going on, and it's non-academic. The kids are not mature enough to really handle any of this. So, I think it is a bigger, I don't know what's behind this or why people are doing destructive things to our children. Restorative justice is destructive to our children. Sex ed, this gender journey is anti-scientific. It's 100% against biology, yet it keeps being pushed. Now, when I look at the curriculum,
yeah. Are you satisfied right now that the Cherry Hill schools are safe enough?
Well, I know that there's a budget that for hardening the schools. I think that's in process. I don't know what the status is. I would ask Andy, maybe what would you recommend in terms of hardening buildings?
Well, the
What
first
do you
thing
see as priorities? Let's put it that way.
the first thing I get, you might not like what I tell you, but when parents reach out to me all the time, I tell them, listen, if my daughter was in private school, she'd be alive today. These things don't go on in private schools. This gender stuff, the three bathrooms, restorative justice. Kids that cause problem, they don't take them in private schools. I coached at one of the best schools in Florida, St. Thomas Aquinas, and they're not going to take a kid that's a problem kid. You can't even get into the school. So if you have the money and you could afford it, the best fix is send your kid to private school, and you avoid everything we're talking about. And there'll be, I'm not going to, say there'll never be an issue, but most
Right.
likely 95% of the time, all these issues that are going on in these big public schools don't happen in a good private school. It's unheard of, a good Christian school, a Jewish school, and any academy, it just doesn't happen. So that's the first fix I tell a parent. Second is, if you can, you can homeschool. If you can't, if your kid has to go to a school like this, you homeschool them. There's charter schools. There's options for parents. Probably not in Jersey like in Florida, where I have my residency. Florida is great. They have parent choice. Parents could take their kids and send them to other schools. They could use their tax dollars for private school. It's just a wonderful thing living in the free state of Florida when you got intelligent people running the state. It's not that way in New Jersey.
No.
These restorative programs is really just a feel good for liberals. It makes them feel good that these kids aren't, there's less suspensions, less arrests, trying to make them. But like I said, if you need it, everyone in life needs accountability. If you never held accountable, what would happen to the world? There'd be no laws, there'd be crime, and you're setting these kids up for just failure over and over again.
I mean, we're even seeing it with the liberal DAs in these cities. It's the same pattern.
People do arrests and they're out the same day. Look at New York City now. It's
Right.
horrible.
And
who wants to go to New York City? Nobody.
The stats look great.
Panita, though? What is Panita? Are you satisfied, Panita, that the Cherry Hill schools are safe right now?
I do not, because basically, because you have allowed this lax attitude about being punished if you misbehave, that basically gives a license to every kid in the school to misbehave because they're not going to be punished. So not only you have the behaviorally challenged kids that are not being disciplined, but now their friends, right? They see that their buddies are not being disciplined, and they say, well, I can just misbehave as well. So now the whole climate in the school now is escalating, where it's very, very hard to control kids that are knowingly know that the adults in the room are not going to hold them accountable. Back to Andy's point, this is warfare on merit. What they're telling these kids, we're going to pass you from one grade to the other. You don't have to do homework. You don't have to behave. And at this point in Cherry Hill, you don't even have a dress code that you need to abide by. You can dress whichever way you want to come to school. So they're training them to disrespect the system, disrespect the adults. So you're asking for an atmosphere of lawlessness. So you're basically incentivizing bad behavior, and the goodly behavioral kids, right? They want to go and study. They want to do their homework. It's very hard for them to do their work if the whole atmosphere in the classroom is so volatile, right? It's hard for you to concentrate if people are constantly distracting the classroom and the teacher is not correcting them because they're not allowed to, right? Because there's this victimhood mentality that based on your skin color or your identity group, you're more victimized or oppressed, and therefore I'm not allowed to discipline you because I have to give you those grades, and I need to discipline you based on your privilege and your level of oppression or lack of oppression, and so on. So you're seeing all these different rules coming up that kids don't know how to navigate anymore, and they just give up. And they said, well, why should I bother, right? Why
You
should
know,
I?
I saw a video on restorative justice. I was watching, it was like a training video, because it's what they do is they go into the school districts and basically they propagandize. And like you said, Panine, it's almost like a religion. It's a dogma. And the woman who was explaining it began by saying, the first thing you have to understand is that we want to transform everyone's way of thinking,
Mhm.
that they have to totally disabuse themselves of all prior notions and assumptions and transform the way they look at the whole system of education and the whole idea of justice.
Absolutely. And
Completely wipe the slate clean of any notions you might have had in the past.
right,
And we
right,
will train you from the ground up in what you need to think and how you need to think and feel now. And
right.
to me, this was chilling. This was chilling.
Uh,
You guys,
Because
you want to hear what happened in Broward? Because
yes,
the public don't hear. You hear about all the, March for Our Lives, that David Hogg didn't
Right.
accomplish one thing in Broward County to help the children in these schools, or the teachers,
Got a
or the
lot of press.
principal. Got a lot of press. The only thing he accomplished in life is signing up more liberals to vote. That's all he got, kids. But what we did was, at the time there was Governor Rick Scott. We were fortunate to have. He's a really good friend of mine now. We became good friends. He formed the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Safety Commission together, of parents, sheriffs, lawyers, doctors, and what they did was dissect everything from this killer when he was in nursery school all the way to the day of the shooting. Okay, so we dissected, instead of just pointing the finger at the gun, and that's the easy thing. That's what a Democrat does, because they're very simple-minded. They could say, "Oh, it's the gun," and that's it. They're done. Let's just blame the gun. We don't have to look at any of the facts. We don't have to look at this kid threatened to shoot kids. A year before, he was killing cats in his backyard. He was trying to rape girls. They had to tie him down in the bus. Let's just forget about all those things, that this thing did, and let's just blame the gun. But in Florida, we didn't do that, because we have like-minded people that want to really make our children safer. So we dissected everything, and they came up and they made Florida schools so much safer in Florida. More money for mental health, more money for hardening the schools. Okay, and we worked on all of that for years. They still meet to get together to discuss things that could better protect our children. But I want to tell you what they don't hear. What happened in Florida was, so we worked hard. After Rick Scott left office, he ran for Senate, and we know he won. He won in Florida. He's a senator now. But Ron DeSantis was running at the time. And I met with him, and he said, "Andy, I want to hold those people accountable in Broward for what happened to your daughter and those old and all those children and the teachers. I'm into holding public officials accountable for what happened in Broward." So I got behind Ron, and Ron ended up. It was a really close race. Ron ended up winning. Within the first month or two of him getting signed into office, he removed the sheriff from Broward County. He signed on to those restorative justice programs. He had a failed department that didn't show up that day when the kids were getting killed. They hid outside behind their cars. They had to go to their trunks to put vests on. They drove down the street. None of them went in the building. Kids are getting murdered. 6 of the deputies hid outside the building, and the one in the school hid behind a wall for 45 minutes. So the sheriff was removed, okay? After that happened, Ron put in a grand jury investigation into the Broward School District. And it took a while, but after 2 years, or maybe been 3 years, I'm not sure exactly, after going through the investigation through a grand jury, he removed 4 of the school board members out of Broward County were removed from office. The superintendent who brought those policies to Broward from Chicago, another liberal Democrat, he was arrested on perjury charges. The lawyer for the school district was arrested on perjury charges and other charges. So it was, you know, you're in a school district now exactly like Broward. They dissected Broward and removed the school board members, removed the sheriff, the superintendent got arrested. They just ended the restorative justice program that they called the Promise Program. That just ended. I sent you an article on it. I think I sent it to Dan. So they're making changes in Broward. It's very hard because Broward is pretty, like, probably 80%, 75% Democrats. So it's very hard to get, you know, things done in a county like that. But the sheriff there is doing a great job. He appointed new school board members. The schools are safer. Florida was a swing state. Now it's far right conservative state. People are moving to Florida, you know, from New York, everywhere in droves. California, they're all moving to Florida because it's safe for our children. The schools now in Florida, they have 1 police officer for every 500 students.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what they did to harden the buildings. I mean, I think we have 19 buildings here. What did they do?
They did perimeter fencing around the school. Single point of entry. Okay, they have 1 police officer for every 500 students. Those are the main things that they work on. They have, you know, certain shutdowns. You know, you can't get into the building. You know, it's mandatory that they do the code reds a certain amount of times a year. They have hard corners. I don't know if you know what that is. In my daughter's school, schools could do this throughout the country with no money. It wouldn't cost them any money. It's called the hard corner. The shooter went down the hallway, okay, and he shot through the door window and killed children right through the door. So if you go along that one wall where the door is, it's called the hard corner. You can't be seen. So every school could do it. So they taped it out in Florida. It's a red mark where children should go. God forbid there's a shooting. They know what wall to go to, so you can't get shot through the window of the door. You know, so Florida made a lot of changes. You know, I don't know about, you know, I go back and forth. Florida, Oregon doesn't even have police officers at the schools. You know, if you're a parent out there, it's 2000. Hey, we live in a messed up society. We're all going to agree there's problems, right? And you know there's shootings, but being a parent, you're responsible for your child. So you're going to send, in 2023, you're going to send your child to a school where there's no police, and parents are doing it. So they're rolling the dice. That's what I call it. When you send your child to a school where there's no police, okay, chances are, I don't want anything to ever happen to any kids, but you're rolling the dice of a potential problem where you don't have law enforcement there. You wouldn't go on a plane without going through security. You wouldn't, you know, courtrooms have security. I don't know why the parents are sending their kids to schools with no police officers. Doesn't make sense.
So, no, Jack and Panina, in Cherry Hill, I don't think we have police officers in every school. I know we have resource officers that are connected to the police, perhaps in the high schools and middle schools. I'm not quite sure we are how, but we don't have them in every school, do we?
I believe they may have them in the middle schools and high schools, but I don't think they have them in the elementary schools.
Okay.
Yeah.
Florida has a program too that helps school districts. It's called the Aaron Feist Guardian Program. He was one of the coaches that ran into the building and got killed. So they named the program after him, and one of a good sheriff, a friend of mine, Grady Judd, wrote the curriculum. And it allows people to go to certain training, okay, and it's very intense. You know, I went through some of the training. They're held to a higher standard, these guardians, for accuracy than a regular deputy. So they're allowing, people that want to go through this program to be able to they're sworn in, they're not police officers, but they're able to work at the schools and be armed. And the training they get is incredible. I went through it, high tech stuff where they're put through drills. Florida, so that'll cost the county less. They can't, we don't have money to have police officers at every school. Okay, well, let's implement this program. We got plenty of veterans that are out of work that could go through this program, and it will cost the school district maybe half the money as a sheriff or a police officer. There's also districts in Florida that if a teacher wants to volunteer and go through the program, they allow it. Mm-hmm. So a teacher could go through a program, and it's not like a weekend. You go for a weekend and then you could carry a firearm in the school. You're talking months of training to be able to go, and it's not mandatory. It's if someone has military background or someone's comfortable with a firearm. The person that's going to be there first when something happens is most likely going to be a teacher. Okay, so if that teacher happens to want to go through the program, I would feel more comfortable with my child there with a teacher that went through the program.
Right.
And they do that in Florida. That's not happening in New Jersey.
So I believe that part of the restorative justice program, one of the kind of goals is to remove police officers from the school and replace them with that restorative justice. Sort of counselors, similar to what you see in blue states for the defund the police program. They want to allocate the funds to social workers. So I think that's where the same thing, where they're trying to remove police officers from the schools because the mere presence of a police officer is offensive to those who are oppressed. So they create the false narrative that police is a threat. So the police is there to protect us, but they're turning the police officers into a threat to the students, and they want to remove them from the schools. And by removing them from the schools, they're making the schools less safe.
Now, Andy, and that there's a movement throughout the whole country, and Jack, you're aware of this. You're actually part of it. For ordinary citizens, parents, taxpayers that have never been involved in quote unquote politics before. The school boards in most places are supposed to be non-political, but we all know they're not really. Coming forward now and running for school board. School board is where the action is in so many communities all across the country. Andy, I suspect you've been part of this. Penina, I know you've been part of it. Jack, you were actually running this November here in Cherry Hill.
That's right.
Jack, you are many of these efforts have been successful. Have shaken up the liberal left, radical left.
You guys have Moms for Liberty in that's a great organization to get involved with.
Go ahead, Andy. You got Andy.
Yeah. Moms for Liberty is a great organization. I've met a bunch of the moms from that, and if they're in Cherry Hill, Jack should be getting involved because there's power of the parents. There's no one more powerful than parents.
I think they're in Philly. I think there's a Philadelphia.
But they're all over throughout the whole country. There's chapters. So parents have power.
Yeah, we do not have a chapter in Cherry Hill, but we're working with chapters in Monmouth County and other counties through the New Jersey Moms for Liberty. I work with No Left Turn in Education, which also is a parents organization to protect children in schools. So that's what really got me involved originally when this whole thing started. And so again, a person like myself that was never interested in politics or really know much about education systems, felt that our children are being targeted. And if I don't step up, even if my children are out of school at this point, then I'm responsible for the malice that is being perpetrated on children in Cherry Hill. So I think every person in Cherry Hill, being a parent or non-parent, you have to step up and protect the children because they're being targeted. They don't know what's going on, what's hitting them, and we all need to step up. And I want to thank Andy for all your work, and Jack for your stepping up, and Dan for you interviewing us today. It's just a story that needs to be heard. The media does not want to cover it, and they're bringing in political overtones where really it's about the children that we need to protect.
Right.
And I want to point out that, Jack, you're a retired educator. You taught in the city of Camden. Are you retired now?
Yes, I am retired. I spent 13 years teaching. However, I spent the bulk of my time in IT. So
Okay.
I certainly have the experience in Camden and other high schools. And
Right.
Just one comment. I with some of these, we'll call them the troubled kids, it's so important to focus on the middle school and the elementary school because these kids begin to surface in fourth, fifth, sixth. By the time, kids get out of middle school, the teachers know who the kids are that are going to be real trouble in the high school. So they are identifiable for whatever the reason they're an issue, but they do identify themselves. They become known by 8th grade, and frankly, high school probably, I don't want to say it's too late, but
Oh, yes.
early intervention is the best. The earlier, the better. Not only for discipline and behavior, but the same thing with academics. If they're having issues, if we have a problem in our middle schools, well, we got to look into 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade.
Absolutely.
And intervene as early as possible.
My wife taught 3rd grade. She saw it as early as 3rd grade. I taught 5th grade. I saw it as early as 5th grade. I had a student it threatened me and this was a long time ago, but I saw it as early as 5th grade and threw a rock through my windshield, through my car windshield. I totally broke the windshield.
Yeah.
And Jack, I say, Penina, thank you for stepping up and running. You're part of a nationwide movement now. The election for school board here in Cherry Hill is November. This November election, people are going to start early voting very soon. I think early voting is going to start
September 23rd, where you can start voting for Board of Ed members in Cherry Hill. The first 4 slots of Board of Education members are pro-parent candidates.
Yes.
So I urge every
right. Number 1, 2, 3, and 4, right, Penina?
Absolutely. Number 1, 2, 3, and 4, they're all good candidates.
We're recommending a vote for Jack, for Jen Shannon, and for Nick Gaudio. Go ahead, Penina.
I wanted to ask Andy a question. How much of what you're seeing in the schools, the deterioration of behaviors, are a consequence of, I guess, the moral decline of our society, the lack of parenting, the lack of Judeo-Christian values? I think if all of us and our children were proficient in the basic 10 commandments, we wouldn't have any of these problems. So I would love to hear your opinion on the moral decline and the correlation to that, to escalation of violence in our schools.
Well, it's throughout the whole country, not just in the schools. And it boils down to children, adults being held accountable for crimes that they commit. And it just metastasized throughout the whole country. You see what happens from at an early age. Jack said the teachers know these kids already. So do the students. The students know who these kids are already. And they cause, they have more rights in these schools than the kids, the A students, the honor roll students, the kids that just want to go there and be with their friends. These kids, these problem kids, they give them more rights than the kids that want to go and be with their friends and get A's in school, B's.
And we're not doing them any favors, by letting them slide because it gets worse and worse.
And really, it's this liberal mentality that's like a cancer to this country that's destroying it from the inside. Everything that the values of our country is deteriorating. I don't think we could do another 4 years of Joe Biden. It started in school with these restorative justice programs. Boys compete, whatever they are, competing with girls in sports. It's absurd. And to these liberal DAs in Philly, in New York, letting these criminals out onto our streets. It's just a problem. And our borders being open, it's endless. You can keep going on. And all of these policies go back to one thing. They're all Democrats, liberals, that are destroying this country from the inside out. To giving, look, I live a lot of the times in the Pacific Northwest, and you talk about all the smoke, the fires, right? They don't manage the forests out here. They want to blame it all on climate change, these Democrats. But there's no logging going on. We have hundreds of billions of dollars to give to Ukraine, but we can't log the Pacific Northwest, so we don't have to breathe smoke in 3 months out of the year. It's just endless policies. And if we don't get the right, look at Florida, how it's run. It's amazing, Florida. What Ron DeSantis did, and to the state of Florida, and what President Trump did to America. Now gas was $2.50 a gallon. I'm paying over $5 now out on the West Coast, and the prices just keep going up for diesel. Inflation. You talk about deterioration of the family. Okay. How do these young children and professionals think now they're going to be able to afford to buy a house? The American dream, to own a house, to have a family, to be able to afford vacation. They're taking away everything that we had in this country by destroying it and leaving our kids. My sons are in their 20s. A lot of their friends, they, like Jack said or something, they give up. These kids are giving up because they're living home till they're 30 years old because they can't afford anything. So it all starts, it all boils down to these bad policies that were brought on into this country.
Well, we want to remind people, I want to bring this to conclusion because we're coming up on 50 minutes. I want to thank all of you for participating. Panina, what did you want to say?
I just want to make a correction to make the differentiation between left and liberal. Okay, what you've seen is the Democratic Party have hijacked liberals and by the left. So it has been basically hijacked by, so it's not liberal anymore. It's illiberal.
Right.
It's complete left. So a lot of liberals do not even know that the party that they're voting for is not liberal. That party does not accept any difference of opinion, any freedom of speech, unless you basically parrot what they tell you and what they tell your child. There's a big difference between liberal and left. These are leftist policies that the Democrats are implementing to take away our country from us.
Right. Traditional classical liberalism is dead. People say that if JFK, if Kennedy came back today, he wouldn't recognize the Democratic Party. If Hubert Humphrey, Henry Jackson, any of those people came back today, they wouldn't recognize the Democratic Party. It's like what Ronald Reagan said, I didn't leave the Democratic Party left me. Jack.
Yeah, one last note. There are 3 seats open in the Board of Education.
Right.
It's myself, Jen, and Nick. If we're going to change things, and it has to be done now, the 3 of us, Jack, Jen, and Nick, have to get in. And the 2 incumbents that are running, they're responsible for what's in place now. Everything that we've been talking about, they've sat around and let this to happen. So they need to go. The 3 of us need to get in, and we'll start righting the ship.
And I want to stress to people, it can be done. We can change things.
Absolutely.
It's up to you. Do not lose your capacity for outrage, because that is the essence of democracy. If democracy is to work, if it is to survive, it depends on you getting out and voting for ordinary, concerned parents and taxpayers who are stepping forward. They're on the line. People like Jack Jen, and Nick that are running here in Cherry Hill. And this is being repeated all over the country. And it starts locally. Remember what Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local. It begins at the local level with you getting out in November, voting in the November election. Early voting starts next week. Going to the line where the Board of Education candidates are. They're not aligned with Democrat or Republican here.
Right.
In New Jersey, they're on a separate line.
Yeah,
So you have
but
to
you,
remember to vote on that
and
line.
you have a teachers union?
Yes.
But we definitely, yes, we have a teachers
All right,
union.
so the teachers
Yes.
union, what they're gonna do is they're just evil, these teachers unions, full of Democrats, and they're horrible people. They're gonna just get behind these Democrats that are running in that school
Right.
district.
Right. It's
They'd
the
never
NEA.
go support a guy like Jack in a million years. It could
We're-
be Jesus
we're
running,
familiar, but
and
if
they won't vote for Jesus. That's how bad these people are.
But
And
if
it starts
enough-
at the teachers union.
right. But if enough people come out, if enough concerned people come out that are deeply concerned about their kids and education, it can be done. It's not a matter of power or money. It's a matter of getting out and casting those ballots,
Okay.
beginning next week with the early voting. So
Well,
the
Jack, I
other
wish you the
many
best.
people vote
You
in
guys
school.
let me know how Jack
It
and his
doesn't
crew
take many
did.
votes to change it. Yes,
Let me know how you guys did.
Okay.
I wish you
we
luck,
we
Jack.
will. We
Thank-
will.
thank
And
you.
I want to thank all of you for
I just want-
being ahead.
One more, I just want to thank Andy for really taking the time tonight to speak with us.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And one of the reasons that this session is so important, obviously, the Board of Education is crucial for the sake of our children, to keeping them safe and educated. But the reason Andy joined us tonight is to remind us that we do not want to have any family in Cherry Hill have the ultimate sacrifice
Oh, God forbid.
that Andy's family paid. We don't want any children and any family in Cherry Hill to have to pay that price. So please, I think for every person that is able to see this, we think in our prayers for Andy and his family, and do your part to protect the children in Cherry Hill. Thank you, Andy, from the bottom of our hearts.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Good seeing you.
We're going to end on that note. This is live on Facebook and Twitter. It's going to be at dancerucci.com. I invite all of you to capture the embed code and put it on your websites or on your Facebook or Twitter. Share it, and let's get the word out. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you so
Good
much.
Okay.
Good night.